Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this, which is an analog light meter. These handy little devices are great if your camera doesn't have a built-in light meter, if the light meter in your camera isn't working, or if you just enjoy overcomplicating simple tasks. Let's go. This meter is a Hanimex Sekonic L-8b light meter made by Sekonic in Japan. As far as I can tell, it's from sometime in the 60s. It must be at least that old because the manual describes the dials on the front as a computer. How times have changed. It's pretty easy to use and works using a photoelectric cell, like a mini solar panel, to produce a voltage which is then used to move a little needle across a scale. It also doesn't require any batteries, which makes it great if you're extremely tight, like me. Of course, the exposure is affected by the brightness of the scene, the film sensitivity, the shutter speed and the aperture. The brightness of the scene is measured by the light meter and we tell it the ISO of the film. The markings then tell us suitable combinations of shutter speed and aperture to give a correctly exposed image. This light meter can be set up for use in 3 situations: bright light, dull light and very dim light. Your guess is as good as mine when it comes to knowing which is which. I should just say that the exact way each model of light meter will handle these situations might be different. I'm going to walk through the process for this one, but every aspect of this video other than the details of configuring the meter ready for measurements is fully applicable to all analog light meters. With that said, for bright light, this meter should be used in this configuration with the cover closed. The ISO is dialed in using this handle. Just make sure that the lines line up correctly. Then take your light measurement, we'll get on to how to do that in just a minute, and look at where the needle is pointing. Follow the line until you reach the dial, and then spin the outer ring until the red marker is in line with the reading. I presume this splotch of red paint is meant to remind you to use the red marker. You will then be presented with an array of shutter speed and aperture combinations that will expose the subject to give it midtones in the final image. For instance, in this case, we could use f11 with 1/100th of a second, or f16 with 1/50th of a second, or f3 with 1/1000th. It's your choice which combination to use. If you're unsure how the nature of your scene will impact your choice of shutter speed and aperture, have a look at my video all about how to use a camera, which I'll link in the comments and put in a card. You might not want to expose for midtones. This is okay because light meters do not occupy a favourable position on the transcendental plane of consciousness. This means that we can easily lie to them and they have no idea. If you want the picture to have more of a washed out look, you can lie to the meter and tell it that you're shooting with film of a lower ISO so that it thinks you need more light than you really do. Equally, if you're photographing a sunset or something, you might want to tell your meter that you're using a film of a higher ISO than you really are. This will mean that you're underexposing your image, which can preserve colours in the sky at the expense of the foreground. See? Lying can be good sometimes. The red markings in between the stated shutter speeds do have exact values, but to quote the manual, to show them all on the scale would make the scale exceedingly illegible. The process is exactly the same when it comes to metering in dull light. Just open the cover to let more light in and use the blue marker to take readings instead. Finally, you can attach a light amplifier if it's very dull and then use the yellow marker. I don't have one of those. For a general scene, just point the meter in the direction of interest and take your reading as described above. Aim the meter slightly downwards to avoid the sky, which is probably much brighter than the foreground, from contributing excessively to the incident light. To photograph portraits, a close-up metering method can be used. This entails facing the meter towards the subject about 4 inches away from it. For this, I refer you to the accurate scale drawing kindly provided by Hanimex in the user's manual. If you're photographing a subject that you can't reach, such as a person from far away, it's also possible to take a close-up reading on your hand, for example, to give an approximate measurement. You can also take incident light metering measurements by pointing the meter away from the subject. This is supposedly the best way as it's very repeatable, but you need to use a diffuser that goes over the photocell to more evenly light the meter. I don't have one of those either, so I don't bother. Metering using one of these meters is not an exact science. With that said, getting your metering correct can make the difference between a good image and a bad one. That's why my photographs tend to be bad ones. That's just the way with these old cameras. You win some, you lose most. At the end of the day, photography is all about how you want to convey a scene. So the best way for you to learn how you want to meter is to get out there and have a go. If you want to underexpose all of your shots because that's the look you're going for, that's okay. I don't care. If in doubt, it's good to aim to overexpose slightly because film is good at retaining highlight regions that would usually end up blown out on a digital sensor. If you're really unsure about what exposure to use and you have more money than sense, bracketing is also a good idea. This is when you take one frame at the suggested exposure, then one at one stop under and one at one stop over. Remember, one stop is a halving or doubling of light. So to change the light by one stop, we can double or halve the shutter speed, or vary the f-stop by a factor of √2. That just about covers all of the basics of metering with an analog light meter, so I might as well just end the video there.